Welcome, friends, back to Achieving Geek Vana. I am Chad, your host, and today this video is going to be a little different. A little different because it's a little bit more personal for me. It's about a creator that really helped define my experience in comics when I was young. If I told you that a writer spent over a decade crafting one of the greatest comic runs in Marvel history, a run that was so beloved it's still in print, still being adapted, still making money, you'd expect that writer to be taken care of, right? You'd think that was a reasonable assumption. But Peter David's family had to crowdfund his medical expenses, and, well, Marvel didn't say a word. I mean, let me tell you why that's not an accident. It's actually a policy. And honestly, it's a policy that's been in place since before any of us were born. And it's not the first time it's left a creator or their family in need. For those who need a quick primer, Peter David was, by most accounts, probably one of the most prolific and well-beloved comic writers of the last 4 decades. His incredible Hulk run, which started in 1987 and ran for 11 years, is still considered one of the definitive superhero comic runs ever written, not just in Marvel history, but in the medium. I mean, that's over 144 issues, or at 144 issues. But, he didn't just write the Hulk. He redefined what the Hulk could be. Before Peter David, Bruce Banner's rage was essentially a plot device, a Jekyll and Hyde, a monster to be unleashed, contained, repeat. And David looked at that character and asked a different question. What if the anger comes from somewhere real? He introduced the idea that Banner's childhood trauma, the abuse he suffered at his father's hands, was the psychological engine behind every transformation. He gave the Hulk a diagnosis before most superhero comics even knew psychology existed. He gave us the gray-suited Joe Fixit, the professor, the merged personality trying to hold all of that damage together. That's Peter David's architecture, and it still defines how we understand that character today, how even other writers write that character. And that was even before we get to Spider-Man 2099. Peter David created Miguel O'Hara, essentially from scratch. The visual design, the personality, the entire future, New York, that the character inhabits, he built that world. You saw Miguel O'Hara in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse if you didn't see him in the comics. The one movie that made nearly $700 million worldwide? Yeah, that character. I mean, Peter David built him from the ground up. He also wrote X Factor, Aquaman, Captain Marvel, Supergirl. The man crossed publishers, crossed genres, and just kept delivering. He was the kind of writer that made you pick up a book you had zero interest in just because his name was on the cover. I can't tell you how many times I did that. He passed away just over a year ago, on May 24th, 2025. And before he passed, his family had to ask the comics community for help covering medical costs. But here's where I need to stop doing what I think a lot of comic commentary does, which is to make this just about Peter David or just about Marvel Comics. Because the truth is, this story didn't start with Peter David. It has happened to many creators over the years. Bill Finger, co-creator of Batman. Bill Mantlo, creator of Rocket Raccoon and Cloak and Dagger. John Ostrander, creator of Amanda Waller and the Modern Suicide Squad. I mean, it started almost 90 years ago. And, well, it's the same story every single time. Let's go back to 1938. 2 kids from Cleveland. You might know them, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. They sold the rights to Superman to Detective Comics, which would eventually become DC Comics, and they sold it for $130. Yep, that's right, $130. Now, before you think that made them wealthy in 1938, in today's money, that's roughly $2,500. which is still, I guess, at the time, I mean, not a lot for the most recognizable fictional character in human history, right? I mean, so DC got a deal. Superman has gone on to generate conservatively billions of dollars across comics, radio, television, film, merchandise, licensing, theme parks, billions. And Siegel and Shuster spent the next several decades in legal battles just to get their names credited on the work. Not ownership, not royalties. They just wanted their names, their recognition. Well, DC eventually gave them a small annual stipend as well as recognition, but only after the first Superman film in 1978 made the entire situation a PR nightmare. Public pressure forced it, not conscience, not generosity, but optics. And here's what I keep coming back to. The legal architecture that did that to Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in 1938 is the same architecture functionally unchanged that left Peter David's family setting up a GoFundMe 86 years later. The character names are different, the corporations are different, but the result is identical. So what exactly is that architecture? Well, it's called work for hire, and you may be familiar with it or you may not. But let's actually talk about what it means and why it's been broken from the very beginning. Work for hire is simply concept that a publisher pays a creator to produce content. The publisher owns the content, the creator gets a flat fee. If the work fails, the creator is out of luck. If the work succeeds, well, the creator is also out of luck, just with more famous work attached to their name, though, if their name is left on that IP to be recognized. Well, let's talk about Jack Kirby. If you want to talk about someone who built a universe and received next to nothing for it, Kirby co-created Captain America, Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the New Gods, the Eternals, Thor as we know him today. The man's fingerprints are basically on every franchise Marvel has turned into a billion-dollar film series, and he even worked for DC with the New Gods and created several other characters. But when Kirby wanted something back from Marvel, do you know what he asked for? Not royalties, not back-end participation, not a piece of the films. His original artwork, the physical pages he drew on. Marvel had been holding thousands of pages of his original art, pages that an original comic art that carried significant monetary value on their own. Well, Kirby fought for years just to get them back. He eventually reached a settlement in 1987 where he got some pages returned, but Kirby had to sign away any future legal claims against Marvel to do it. He surrendered his right to ever sue in exchange for what should have been his property.
I think what Marvel finally did was a very fine gesture. Sure, it still hurts, and I still feel those hurts, but they're kind of numb, and I've never really allowed them to ruin my life or linger in my thoughts.
He got some pages. He got a credit. He got the recognition from fans that he absolutely deserved. What he didn't get was a percentage of anything his imagination built. Now, John Ostrander's situation puts a finer point on just how little has changed. Ostrander created the modern Suicide Squad in 1987, and with it, Amanda Waller, one of the most compelling characters in the DC universe. You know, the Wall. Played by Viola Davis across multiple blockbuster films and series, a character with her own series built from scratch by John Ostrander under a work-for-hire contract for, again, a flat page rate. But in 2009, Ostrander developed a severe glaucoma that threatened to take his sight entirely. He could not afford the surgeries he needed to save his eyes. This was not a luxury medical expense, not elective care, eye surgery to protect his vision. The comics community rallied. A charity auction was held at Chicago Comic-Con with donated artwork from people like Bruce Timm, Jim Lee, Neil Adams, George Perez, Kevin Smith, and Matt Groening, among dozens of others. And they actually raised over $28,000 in one weekend. So Ostrander got his surgery. The man who created Amanda Waller A character appearing in multi-million-dollar films needed a charity auction to afford eye surgery. I mean, here's what gets glossed over in these conversations. It's not just that the contracts were unfair. It's that the contracts were designed to be unfair. The entire system was built to ensure that the corporation, not the creator, owns the upside of any success. The creator takes on all the creative risk, all the hours, the craft, and the imagination, and the corporation takes all the financial upside if it works. If it doesn't work, the creator doesn't get paid much. And if it works, the creator also doesn't get paid much. So while Siegel was fighting in court, while Kirby was fighting for his own pages back, while Ostrander was holding a fundraiser to just afford eye surgery, Peter David was at Marvel writing, delivering, building under the same system, with the same contract, same architecture, but it was a different decade. Now, in 1992, a group of Marvel's hottest artists, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, they all walked away from Marvel specifically because of creator rights. They founded Image Comics on one principle: creators own their work. Period. Creators own their work. And it did work. Spawn became one of the best-selling independent comics of all time. The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman's creator-owned book, became a television franchise worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And Kirkman actually owned a piece of it. He got paid, not as a favor, but as a right, as a creator. Now, Image's history isn't without its own complications, of course. Some of those founding creators would eventually face disputes with other collaborators of their own. But the creator-owned model doesn't automatically make everyone a good actor. And I think it's important to understand. But the founding principle was correct. Creators should own what they build, and the market proved it could absolutely work. That moment should have been a wake-up call for the entire industry. Marvel and DC had a clear signal. The talent wants ownership. The market supports creator-owned work. The model is viable. So why not evolve? Well, and for a brief window in the 90s and even the early 2000s, there were some conversations, some creator participation agreements, some back-end deals, some royalty structures that at least acknowledged the problem existed. Now, to be fair, the pressure from Image did produce some changes. High-profile, star-level creators can sometimes still today negotiate back-end participation, character creation bonuses, or royalty agreements. Those deals exist, but they're in the minority. They go to creators with enough leverage to demand them, the ones whose name on a cover absolutely moves product phenomenally. But for mid-tier professionals or anyone breaking into the industry, the standard work for hire contract is still the only offer on the table. The system accommodates its stars just enough to keep them quiet. And, well, everyone else, they get the same contract Siegel and Shuster would recognize. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying work for hire needs to be abolished overnight. Publishers take real financial risks. The infrastructure of printing, distribution, marketing, and retail costs, that all costs real money. Somebody has to fund all that. But, there really is a meaningful difference between a publisher who takes a reasonable return on their investment or treating creators like interchangeable content-generating machines whose output becomes corporate property the moment it touches a page. Those two are not the same thing, and the industry's been conflating them for almost a century. Here's what a more honest system actually looks like, at least I think so. None of this is revolutionary either, because none of it is really new. These models already exist in other creative industries. So first, residual participation for characters still generating revenue. Every time Marvel prints a new Peter David Hawk omnibus, and they do, because it sells, his estate should receive a percentage. That's not charity. That's how publishing works in almost every other creative medium on the planet. Standard publishing royalties run somewhere between 10 and 15%. Let's apply even a fraction of that to a beloved run that retails north of $100 in the hardback omnibuses, and they sell tens of thousands of copies across multiple printings. I mean, you're talking about real money, money that existed, money that was generated directly by Peter David's imagination and craft, money that went entirely to Marvel. His family, instead, they had to go to a GoFundMe. The math on that is not really that complicated. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not really that forgivable either. Second, film and television participation rights. If your character appears in a theatrical film, you should receive a negotiated fee, not as a gesture of goodwill, but as a contractual right. Miguel O'Hara appeared in a film that generated nearly $700 million at the global box office. Peter David created Miguel O'Hara. The Directors Guild has participation protection built into every contract. The Writers Guild has them too. Comic creators are the original writers and directors of these universes. So they invented the characters, wrote the arcs, built the worlds these films are drawn from, and they are the source material. I mean, shouldn't they deserve the same structural protection that every other creative guild in Hollywood has already negotiated for itself? The fact that they don't have it isn't an oversight. It's a choice the industry keeps making. Okay, so third, healthcare as a baseline. It shouldn't be an emergency fundraiser. I mean, the Hero Initiative exists, and I want to be specific and acknowledge them because they do genuinely important work, providing emergency financial assistance to comic creators in need. But really, most of the time, they shouldn't have to. I mean, a multi-billion-dollar industry should not be relying on fan charity to cover its workers' medical expenses. That is not a heartwarming community story. This is a structural failure dressed up as a heartwarming community story. I mean, the community rallying around Peter David, that was beautiful. But the fact that it was necessary, well, that's kind of a disgrace, isn't it? I mean, none of these things are radical proposals. Film has them, music has them, book publishing has them. Comics is the outlier. And the only reason it stays the outlier is because nobody with the power to change it has been forced to yet. Okay, this is where I'm going to talk to you directly for a second because I don't want this to end as another video essay that makes you feel bad or it then just goes away. I mean, there are actual things you and I can do. For example, one, buy creator-owned comics. Lots of publishers, Image, Dark Horse, Boom, Studios, Oni Press. When you buy those creator-owned books, and not all of them are creator-owned at those publishers, but most of them are, the money, for the most part, goes back to the people who made them. With your dollars, you are literally voting for a different model. Consider picking up an indie or creator-owned book next week when you're at the comic store. That's a simple way to start. So, two, you could support the Hero Initiative. They're a 501c3 nonprofit. And if you're able, you can donate directly, and every dollar goes to comic creators facing financial and medical crisis. The link is actually down in my description. But even if you can't donate, just share that knowledge out in the world. Okay, the third thing to do is pretty simple. Learn the creator's name. When Marvel announces a new film or DC announces a new film featuring a character you love, look up who created that character. Say their name. Share their story with others. Awareness is actually the first step toward industry change, and it really costs nothing to you and I. And number four, buy directly from creators every chance you get. I mean, at conventions, through Kickstarters, through Patreon. Cut out the corporate layer and put money directly in the hands of the people making the work you love. You don't have to do it always, but do it from time to time to make sure you're taking care of those creators that take care of you. Now, none of this fixes the system overnight. But the system only changes when consumers stop being passive. I mean, the readers in 1978 pressured DC enough that Siegel and Shuster finally got their credit and a stipend. Fans have moved this industry before, and I believe they can do it absolutely again. So here's my wrap up. Peter David, he's gone, but the Hawk he wrote is still selling. Miguel O'Hara, the character he built from nothing, is still showing up in multi-million-dollar films. The work outlived the man, and the system that failed him is still fully operational. I'm not here to tell you to be angry at Marvel specifically, or DC even, or any one company. I'm here to tell you that the architecture of work for hire has been broken and is archaic since well before Superman even first appeared in 1938. And it's going to stay broken until the industry decides that the people who create the ideas are worth more than the ideas themselves. And real sustained generational fandom only exists because somewhere a person sat down and imagined something that didn't exist before. Peter David imagined Miguel O'Hara. Jerry Siegel imagined a man who could fly. Jack Kirby imagined entire worlds. The least we can do is make sure the next generation of people who imagine things for us can at least afford to go to the doctor. So let me know in the comments below, do you think work for hire is fixable, or does the whole model need to get replaced? I genuinely want to read your take and have a conversation about it. So drop it in the comments below. Don't forget, like the video if I earned it. Share it if someone in your life needs to hear this argument. And as always, stay geeky, my friends. Stay geeky. And I'll see you all later.